Out of all of the characters in Elden Ring, I still find Radagon to be the most intriguing. He's the one that I think about the most, and one that I have the most unanswered questions about. And what ends up being one of the big, if not the biggest, reveals in the game, we uncover Radagon's dark, guarded secret, that he and Marika are one and the same. During an interview with Stephen Colbert, George R.R. Martin said that FromSoft asked him to build them a world so that they could basically go in and destroy it. So he wrote them a history of what happened 5,000 years before the current game, who all the characters were, and who was killing each other, and what powers they had. Listening to his interview sparked my imagination, and it got me thinking about this topic in a new way. So I'm going to try and present Radagon and Marika and their motivations as Martin may have imagined them. We don't know much about Marika's background, only that she's Numen, which are a group of people who hail from beyond the lands between, and are possibly the descendants of otherworldly beings. The preset appearance of the Numen is very aged, and this corresponds to the line about them being long-lived but seldom born. In the mountaintops of the Giants lies the Zamor ruins. The Knights of Zamor were hailed as heroes in the war against the Giants, and their armor set describes them as long-lived warriors, mortal enemies of the fire giants, devotees to winter. It's the phrase long-lived that stands out to me as possibly having ties to the Numen. The Zamor could have descended from a Numen tribe that settled in the far north, learning how to conquer the brutality of their environment, and developed their ice sorcery through their ceaseless struggle against the fire giants. The Northerner template describes this hardy group of people as being descended from giants, so we can see that it's possible to have giant heritage without having a conspicuous appearance. This preset also has bright platinum hair and pale skin, similar to Marika's coloring, and in fact, in my opinion, Marika looks more like the Northerner than she does the Numen, and it makes me wonder if maybe one of her parents was a Northerner and the other was a Zamor, the forbidden romance of fire and ice. Or should I say, ice and fire? Now where have we seen this combination before? Another clue that makes me think that Marika has Zamor blood in her is that one of the ancient heroes of Zamor drops Radagon's scar seal. Having Zamor and Northerner blood in her lineage would give grounds for Marika beginning her war campaign for the Erdtree in the mountaintops of the Giants region, as supported by the location of her first church. And just in view of this church is the Forge of the Fire Giants. Marika growing up in the north, watching that roaring flame day by day and fearing what it meant for the safety of the Erdtree, and deciding to start her war campaign here because of that is such great visual imagery. The war against the Giants was Marika's key battle in establishing the Age of the Erdtree. The fire giants, who inhabited the mountaintops, had a flame strong enough to destroy the Erdtree, so Marika decided to extinguish them, commanding her first husband, Elden Lord Godfrey, to lead that fight. The Giants were attacked and wiped out, save for one whom Marika spared not out of mercy, but as a prisoner cursed to tend to the undying flame for eternity. Which leads us right into the first theory on our list. Curses are a big theme we see all throughout the game. So is it possible that Radagon's existence is the result of a curse placed on Marika? We know that Martin likes using hair color as a code for lineage. We see this with all of the demigods who inherit Marika's and Radagon's hair colors. We all know very well by now that Radagon's red hair is one of the most referenced traits in the game. And we learn later on in another shocking reveal that his red hair is a trait shared with the fire giants. The giant's red braid reads, "Every giant is red of hair," and Radagon was said to have despised his own red locks. Perhaps that was a curse of their kind. There seems to be a popular interpretation of this last line to mean that the red hair was a curse inflicted on Radagon via Marika, that Marika was the one cursed with this red hair as retribution for her slaughter of the fire giants, and she hated it so much that she expunged it from her body in the form of an autonomous being who became Radagon. So kind of like an Adam and Eve situation. The idea that the last surviving fire giant cursed Marika with red hair as punishment for her actions is very difficult for me to get behind. Like, that's the best that the fire giant, who just witnessed the entire genocide of his race, could do, was to just give her red hair. Another reason I don't like this theory is that there is direct mention of someone being cursed at the conclusion of the war against the giants, but it's Marika cursing the fire giants, not the other way around. I also think the placement of these revelations about Radagon are significant. The first one is in Lendal, and the second one is in the mountaintops of the giants, which you can't access until you complete Lendal. The big shocker, obviously, is that Radagon is Marika, so what bigger revelation about Radagon can they possibly throw at us to rival that? That Radagon is part fire giant. There is one other detail that I feel supports the theory about his giant heritage. The art of smithing originated with the giants, and we learned this through Iji and Huang, our beloved blacksmiths. While Marika destroyed the Elden Ring, Radagon tried to repair it, a giant skill that he may have inherited or been taught. And it's this image of him smithing away with Marika's hammer that became the iconic look we know him by. Radagon also forges the Golden Order Greatsword. Meanwhile, Marika, assuming she doesn't know how to smith, had to imprison Huang to commission him to make her god-slaying weapon. I just think the signs point to Radagon being part fire giant, which means this curse theory doesn't work for me. So let's move on to the next theory. Twins are another big theme in Elden Ring. We see twins with smaller characters, with bigger characters. We know that Martin loves twins, so it's not too far-fetched to think that Radagon and Marika might have been twins. Radagon and Marika, having once been separate entities, has merit based on this particular scene with Melina.
O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both. Mine other self.
It sounds like it wasn't until after this conversation that they were conjoined, that at this moment she was convincing him to become one with her so that she could shatter the Elden Ring. And we've seen how the demigods seem to inherit one person's traits over another. If Radagon and Marika were twins, they could have each inherited distinct traits from the depths of their bloodline. And with the Zamora being sworn enemies of the fire giants since eternity, having red hair would be humiliating for Radagon. He'd have a good reason to despise its association. Although I like the idea of this theory because it fits the story given the theme of twins, and I can picture Martin having written Radagon and Marika this way, I don't know if it has enough support to draw from, and it raises a couple of irreconcilable questions for me. While Radagon was married to Renala, he ordered the Carian preceptors to wear masks that had the mouths sewn shut with golden thread to serve as a reminder that all of their matters were to be kept private. He also brought with him to the Caria Manor a gold sewing needle that was used to tailor the clothes of demigods. So what secrets could Radagon possibly want to hide so as to make sure his Carian teachers didn't spill the beans? And why would a former war general need to take a sewing needle capable of altering demigod clothes with him to his new wife's estate? I interpret these two clues to imply that Radagon must have been considered a god at this point, and his true identity was something he wanted to keep under wraps, because I don't see how being Marika's twin brother or having been part giant would be reason enough for secrecy, especially because Renala seems to be one of the more accepting and progressive characters. So if Radagon isn't Marika's twin, who or what was he? Gold is the most prevalent color in the lands between, from the Golden Order to the Erd Tree and everything underneath. It's the color of Marika the goddess. In an attempt to forge a more refined version of herself, did Marika split off the unwanted aspect in the form of Radagon? Just to put this theory in context, an alloy is a mixture of metals, and alloys are created in order to achieve desired qualities like improved strength or certain colors. While we see lots of gold in the armor sets and trinkets of Erd Tree believers, we see red gold used distinctly in reference to the Crucible Knights who served Godfrey when he was Elden Lord. Red gold is achieved by the mixture of gold and copper, not unlike the hair coloring of Marika and Radagon. The idea of Marika considering her blood to be alloyed, mixed, with that of a fire giant of all things. And her wanting to split off this part of her that represented the primordial crucible is fitting with the Golden Order's teachings of selective grace. Marika, as a secretly biracial goddess who wanted to be pure, fits in line with the prejudice and discrimination we see throughout the game, and reminder that this is the same woman who chained up her children in the city sewer system because they basically weren't pretty enough. But the thing about alloys that makes them desirable is that they are physically stronger than unalloyed metals. Gold on its own is weak and soft, but you mix it with copper and silver and it becomes stronger. Marika would eventually come to learn this, that being divided into two different aspects of herself didn't give her the strength needed to shatter herself, thus melding with Radagon was necessary. For this theory to work, in my opinion, Marika or the Greater Will, or both, would need to at some point consider her mixed heritage to be unfit for her post as goddess. So in order to make her pure gold, unalloyed gold, but weaker as a result, they split off the red copper aspect in the form of Radagon. But then decided later on, oh, it's okay, he can go on to sire children with her, even though we took him out because we don't like him. I just don't agree with Radagon being the byproduct of some eugenics campaign, because Radagon was called a champion, he was called a hero, and his children wore their heritage representing him proudly. I just don't see him as being an unwanted offshoot that Marika had to pluck from her body. I think his inception and design had to be more purposeful than that. Which brings us to the next chapter. Mimicry is the ability to take on the appearance of another thing. When mimicry happens in nature, it's most often for the survival of the creature. When people do it, it's usually out of deception. We see references to mimicry in three very interesting items: the Mimic Tear Ashes, the Mimic's Veil, and the Law of Regression. The Mimic Tear Ashes state that the Eternal City used Mimic Tears to try and forge an artificial lord. And though this organism takes on the appearance of the summoner, its mimicry doesn't extend to imitating the summoner's will. The Mimic's Veil is one of the items that Godric stole from Lindell, and it was also known as Marika's Mischief. The Law of Regression is the incantation that we use in front of Radagon's statue in Lindell to lay bare his secret, and it states that it reveals mimicry in all its forms. This incantation can also be used on the Mimic's Veil to reveal the deceiver. The fact that the Mimic's Veil is called Marika's Mischief might be one of the biggest hints about Radagon's origins. Godric famously used this veil to disguise himself as a woman in order to flee safely from the capital. And before that, who knows how Marika used it? Is it possible that she created this disguise of this powerful champion named Radagon and then used a Mimic Tear to create a clone of that disguise in order to carry out her nefarious assignments that she only trusted herself to handle? This theory proposes some interesting speculations regarding Radagon's sudden appearance during the Liurnian Wars. Because the first Liurnian War didn't end in a stalemate, it ended with Radagon victorious. But if we've learned anything about the way that Marika likes to fight, we've learned that she doesn't show mercy, but instead of annihilating the inhabitants of the Carian Kingdom as Marika did with the Giants, with the Stormhawk King, and with the original dwellers of Castle Morn, the Carian Kingdom is spared to the point where they're able to rebuild their armies for a second war. It's also interesting to note that Godfrey wasn't sent in to deal with the Liurnian conflict, because I'm sure if Marika really wanted the Carian Kingdom squashed, she could have sent in the big guns. There's a curious bit of information we learn from the Carian Knight's sword, weapon of knights sworn to Carian royalty. Despite numbering fewer than 20, this power made them a match for even the champions of gold in battle. This made me wonder if, perhaps during that first Liurnian War, Marika, after seeing how overpowered the Carian Knights were in realizing powerful sorcery at play here, thought that there might be greater benefit in infiltrating their forces and learning from them rather than destroying them. So she sent Radagon back with a different approach. During the Second Liurnian War, Radagon is begging for Renala's forgiveness for his military aggressions, and he's professing his love to her. Marika could have created this image of the kind of man that she thought Renala would fall for, this tall, red-headed, handsome champion. Even the naming convention of Radagon and Renala is suspicious to me, but by giving him this glorious red hair, it may have attracted Renala to Radagon even more, because I think Renala may have had a thing for redheads, and I'm 100% serious, so let me explain. Let's read the description of the Stargazer heirloom. A talisman engraved with the legend of a queen. The young astrologer gazed at the night sky as she walked. She had always chased the stars every step of her journey. Then she met the full moon, and in time, the astrologer became a queen. And we know, of course, that this description is of Renala, but what piece of information here do we see that sticks out? That Renala was an astrologer. Now let's look at the Sword of Night and Flame. Astrologers, who preceded the sorcerers, established themselves in mountaintops that nearly touched the sky, and considered the fire giants their neighbors. And there we have it, the basis of the connection between Radagon and Renala. The astrologers called the fire giants their neighbors. The Sword of Night and Flame is a treasure of the Carian dynasty. It represents a union between the astrologers and the fire giants. I think that Renala was fated to have a weak spot for Radagon, and Marika knew to exploit this. She may have created Radagon as a way to infiltrate the Carian kingdom, or to learn the secrets of Rey Lucaria, or maybe that contentious fire giant part of her heritage was attracted to Renala. But even though Radagon was created to be a Manchurian candidate, he develops his own autonomy. His icon states that as the husband of Renala, he studied sorcery, and as the husband of Marika, he studied incantations. Thus did the hero aspire to be complete. This doesn't read like a carbon copy of Marika. This reads like an autonomous being that has his own motivations. So even though this may have been a disguise that Marika created and then brought to life, it's very much its own entity at this point, and it has a very distinct identity. And whether or not Radagon was sent to Renala under false pretenses, I think that he genuinely fell in love with her. The bittersweet story between Radagon and Renala that Pastor Muriel shares with us is the only loving relationship between spouses that we see in the game. We certainly don't see this language of love and devotion used in reference to Marika and Godfrey. And when Radagon is commanded to return to Lindell, he takes his assignment of Golden Order lapdog, as Marika calls him, quite seriously, because that's most likely how he was designed to be. He develops Golden Order incantations and forges a sword to represent its tenets. He's the honor roll straight-A student, something Marika clearly was not. I really like this mimicry theory because it allows for Radagon to be an independent being while still technically being Marika, and I think it leaves room for other themes to be pulled into play here without any conflict to this theory, which brings us to our last chapter. The theme of duality is pervasive in Elden Ring. It's the very first image we're greeted with when we start the game. Marika shattering the Elden Ring, Radagon trying to repair it. He represented duty while she represented choice. These two conflicting wills are very clearly not of the same identity. Take a look at the differences in which attributes are raised in Radagon's versus Marika's Scar Seals and Sword Seals. Radagon's raises vigor, endurance, strength, and dexterity, while Marika's raises mind, intelligence, faith, and arcane. He appears to be her opposite in every way. This idea of duality is another reason that I think the Zamor and Northerner theory makes so much sense, because that union would have caused a lot of inner turmoil in Marika, both parts of her background being sworn enemies since the beginning of time, and maybe this extreme dichotomy of her heritage caused an identity crisis. Radagon could be the result of some expression of dissociative identity disorder. Radagon being the personification manifest of Marika's conflicting will is such an amazing concept, because he represented all of the things that she was not, and by Marika removing this part of her, it caused disorder. Splitting off these aspects of her infected the integrity of her body as a vessel, and that's when she realized she'd have to be complete again in order to carry out her plans. And even though Radagon was a fundamentalist follower of the Golden Order, he believed Marika and he obeyed her when she asked this of him, 2 qualities that I think Marika may have removed from herself. And because Radagon is the one loyal to the Golden Order and upholds his duty as ordained by the Greater Will, he's the aspect of Marika that is released from their shackles inside the Erdtree, and also the one that we end up having to kill. Although we may never get the full story of just who Radagon is, I think that's part of his allure, and I'm sure there are a lot of other theories and ideas out there about Radagon and Marika, and if you have any that you really like or that you've come up with, definitely let me know in the comment section. I love reading your comments, I get such amazing feedback, and I thank you very much for always sharing your thoughts with me. I learn something new every single time I post a video. And just a quick announcement that I have enabled membership for my channel, so if you'd like to be extra generous in your support, I'd so greatly appreciate it. But everything goes back into video production, so my software licensing fees, my audio licensing fees, whatever expenses are associated with making a video, it's just going to go right back into that. And I have a lot of amazing ideas coming up, not just for Elden Ring, more Elden Ring, but other games that I think are going to be really fun to discuss as well. So definitely check that out if you are interested in that, and I would appreciate it. But thank you so much for watching my video and for leaving a thumbs up, for subscribing, for doing all the stuff that goes into successful channels. And last but not least, I have a shout out for Sean Fox for coming closest to guessing the topic of this video based on a screenshot I shared a couple days ago, and I got some really funny answers for that. So thank you to everyone who played along. All right, guys, that's it for now. I'll see you next time. Bye.